Welcome back to Studio Friends, and in this video I will be reposing that She-Hulk figure. It's actually a show that I worked on and I animated She-Hulk, so maybe you know a thing or two about making her look cooler. Let's get her in something a little bit more dynamic, not as much of a museum pose, because right now it's a little boring, so let's get her in front of the camera and let's go. Boom, there it is. So we are going to mimic this cover of She-Hulk from the comics. There's just her flexing, looking kind of like a bodybuilder, but I think it adds in a little bit more personality and a little bit more shelf presence. So let's get some accessories out. Luckily, there's not a whole lot she comes with, so all we're gonna need is this little extra fist. And let's swap out the other hand and get it ready. Okay, here she is in animation terms, calling it zeroing her out, which means all her, like in animation, all the controls for all the limbs are at zero. So she's kind of in a T pose. And I find it just easier to kind of start a new pose from scratch and kind of just wiping the slate clean and then just starting from here. That's actually, I find because her hair is kind of massive and it'll get in the way of actual posing. So I'm gonna start posing her without her head sculpt. And you're left with that right there. So you have her like that, and as you can see in the reference photo, she's flexing and then her shoulders are pointed down towards her screen right side. And what you're gonna wanna do is have the hips kind of counteracting that angle. So it'll be a bit of a pinch in the abs on her right-hand side, screen right side. And then that kind of create a little bit more dynamic lines in the actual pose itself. So let's do that. Okay, so we bent her chest and shoulders to the right, and then it automatically kind of makes her hip pop here. So then you have this line here and this line here kind of counteracting each other, which is just a bit more appealing to the eye and helps with a better silhouette. And from there, the leg would kind of split out that way. So you kind of try to bring it as close as you can to the middle, and then that kind of creates that line of action and that like pinch in the abs. And also, so her right shoulder's kind of back a bit, so you just want to twist her this way a bit, and then her back leg is holding all her weight, so it's going to be kind of lean back a bit. And their front leg, so the front and up, a little bit of a bend. She's like kind of on her toe a little bit. Let's see if we can get that foot a little closer. There you go. I think this is a pose that won't be able to stand on its own. And you gotta have the back leg because it's holding up a lot of her weight. It's a bit more stable with her leg. Can't really move that much. A bit more to the side, her foot. It's looking a little off balance there. It looks like she's gonna fall over. So you kind of just wanna lean it a little bit more right. And a lot of that is gonna be done from kind of just the angle of how she's going to be on your shelf. So as you can see, the more you turn it that way, the legs are looking a little bit more like they are in the reference. But then that means her shoulders are a little bit too cranked to her left. So you got to bring it around a little bit more. Then you got a little bit of a twist there now. Let's get a little closer. Let's bend those arms so it doesn't look as crazy. About forward and around. Make sure you have to bend in that wrist there. Forward and around. Broke that. 1 second. All right, so she's a little bit more bent. Her arms are a little bit more bent there. And it kind of wrinkles up the costume a bit, but a lot of that's going to be covered by her hair. But yeah, it kind of looks okay. You can see a bit more too many of the wrist pegs. The angle of her foot's a little off because it supposed to kind of look like she's pointing her toe. So let's bring that leg up a little bit more. Bend that. And then she's a little more kind of just balancing on her toe. Okay, now we got the head sculpt here. I think so the way she kind of has her eyes is still kind of looking off to the side, but not quite as much as I have it here. Okay, so I moved the eyes a little bit. They're not as intense as they were previously, but they also weren't too far off. So let's pop that head on and see how it looks. So right away, I haven't done anything. I just literally just put the head sculpt back on to kind of how I had it. And it looks very stupid. So first thing first, definitely got to raise that head sculpt up a little. Let me get that. So heads up a little bit, got to move it to face the camera. In my previous video about the Joker, I always said you got to pose it to camera or cheat to camera, which was an animation term. And so what you got to do, in my mind, when you're looking at your shelf, the camera is your vision. So your vision is straight on. So how this, my camera is right now is how your vision is going to be when looking at your figure. So you got to make it look as good as possible from this angle. So let's move the head to face camera a little bit more. Head up a little bit. Then, if possible, I don't know if the figure will allow me to do it, kind of want to bend her head, tilt her head a little bit screen left, and it kind of just breaks up that action a little bit and breaks up that line. Woo, safe. Could have been bad. Could have been bad. No, definitely way more of an angle on her torso. Kind of lost it there when I was messing with the head. A little bit more like that. There you go. See, now you got that line of action here with the arms, and then cross here with the hips a little bit. It's a little hard with the head because that hair isn't very malleable, so you can't get a good angle on her head, unfortunately. But overall, I think already it's starting to look way more dynamic than how it looked before. And yeah, I mentioned earlier in the video that I animated Shehulk. It's actually one of my shots was when she was twerking with Megan Thee Stallion, which obviously got a lot of flack online. But it was a really fun show to work on, honestly. And like my anim supervisor was amazing. And at the time, you know, the show wasn't out yet. We didn't think the show was going to get so much backlash than it actually did. But going back, watching the show, I actually think it's pretty good. I think the animation holds up in some scenes and other scenes not so much, as, you know, animation techniques have advanced. But hey, you know what? I got to say I worked on that show, and I have her now in my shelf in 1/6 scale version. And it brings me back posing the character, this figure like this, because when you're animating, you basically have an action figure in your computer on your screen, and you're rotating and moving things around, moving the arms around, and that's how you animate. And doing this is almost like stop motion animation for me. So it's a good time. And I think we're kind of in a good place with this pose. I can bend her right arm a little more. Hopefully that silicone holds up. I don't know if it will. I feel like I'm gonna break a joint there. And then I feel like the left arm could be slightly bent less. And her head can tilt down a little more. And her wrist doesn't need to be as cranked. There. I think that's looking pretty good. It's a little bit too much, I guess, like a thigh gap. You kind of want to close that off a bit. And then you could probably move this arm out so she looks a little broader. Just kind of open that up a little bit more. Bring that arm down, actually. And then maybe not as much of a bend. Boom, there you go. You know what? I think that's looking pretty good. Let's get it back on the shelf and see how it's looking. All right, here it is back on the shelf. Looking a little bit more dynamic, looking a little cool, but it's not really a pose thing. It's more of a figure thing. The silicone arms look kind of wild, especially with that wrist. And yeah, honestly, I do like the pose, but I don't like the figure in the pose. Plus, you need to have the stand with this figure's pose. And as you can see, she's kind of busting out this cabinet. So I think I might change it back. But overall, I do think the pose does look good. It's just the limitations of the figure itself. But hopefully you got something out of this video and some of my tips and tricks help you out in the future. Stay tuned for some more reposing. I got plenty more figures to repose. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe for more of this kind of content. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.